Are you ready to break through the mental barriers holding you back? Welcome to the Mind Mastered Secrets of Excellence with Don Grant. Since 2001, Don has been guiding elite athletes like PGA Tour champions, Olympians, and world champions, and everyday individuals toward peak performance. With a proven track record, including helping Vijay Singh win the 2008 FedEx Cup, and her PGA Tour clients averaging a 219% increase in earnings. Dawn knows what it takes to succeed. She's the inventor of the Mind Mastered app, author of 7 Strokes in 7 Days, a sought-after speaker worldwide, and the proud owner of Amelia Shotgun Sports in Northeast Florida. Join us as we dive into powerful strategies, inspiring interviews, and Dawn's unique insights to help you excel in every area of your life, sports, career, relationships, and beyond. And now, here's your host, Don Grant.
All right, folks, welcome to the Mind Mastered Secrets of Excellence with Don Grant. I'm excited to have you here and to be following along. And of course, I always have awesome people that I love to chat with. And this one in particular, her and I are doing some of the same things. So performance coaching, training type stuff. So I'm excited to hear Alison's approach and her expertise and all the great things that she brings to the table and some of the things that we probably even have in common. So I've got Alison Gorrell with me here, and she's a mental performance coach, but she's also a retired professional basketball player. So she's not messing around, and she's coming from that angle and having experienced the mental game herself, I'm sure. So thanks for being here, Alison.
Thanks so much for having me.
Sure thing. Sure thing. Well, I'm excited to hear so much about what you've been up to and what brought you to where you're at now. So I gave some little baby highlights. Go ahead and tell us the greatest things about yourself and what you've accomplished.
Well, I started off playing Division I basketball, and then from there went overseas. And at the same time of playing professional basketball, I got my master's in sport and exercise psychology. And then I got to play pro throughout Europe and Australia for 8 years. So I bounced around to a bunch of different places and got to do some awesome traveling and also work with some really awesome teams out there doing mental performance coaching. And then nearing the end of my basketball career, I started my own business as a mental performance coach. And then I've been doing that now for going on 6 years. And I'm really fortunate to get to work with from youth to pro and Olympic athletes. So it's been really awesome.
That's so cool. And I look forward to hearing how that all kind of transpired for you over the years. So growing up, have you always loved competing and being an athlete?
Yeah. I definitely, from when I was young, just wanted to compete at everything. My older siblings were all athletes, and my parents were super active. So we were just competing and doing all types of stuff. I played all types of sports, but definitely settled on basketball as being the one that I really wanted to pursue.
I gotcha. Without going off on a tangent already, or maybe we could, I've always been fascinated with how people tend to have that competitive edge or not, right? Like it's either there or it's not. So how many siblings do you have?
I have 3 siblings.
And did they all have that competitive nature?
Yeah, I would say we're all pretty competitive. I think that, so I have an older brother and an older sister and then a younger sister. And I think me kind of being in the middle made me the most competitive because I really wanted to compete with my older siblings. And then I think just being something about being the middle child just made me really want to go after everything.
I gotcha. And what about your parents? Were they competitive athletes?
My dad, super competitive. He played a lot of different sports. He played basketball. He ran. My mom was, as an adult, she was playing tennis when I grew up. She didn't play like college sports or anything like that, but sports was a big part of everything we did as a family.
I gotcha. So did you know from a fairly young age that you wanted to be a professional basketball player?
You know, when I was really young, I don't think I really thought about going pro. I just was so excited about the day-to-day of competing. And I think it's a little bit different when I was growing up versus kids nowadays, because now there's all the social media and everyone's talking about those things so early on. But when I was growing up, it was more just like, what am I doing this weekend kind of thing. But I
Right.
I knew I wanted to be really good and I was really committed from a young age. So I thought about college and stuff like that. But I don't think it was always on my radar that I wanted to play professional until I got a little bit older.
Okay. So then what happened?
So then once I got into like high school and started taking it more seriously, I grew up in a smaller mountain town. And so I didn't have as much access early on to like, there was nobody else around me that was playing at the level that I was playing. So I had to like drive down to the city and then kind of get into these different spaces where it was more normal to get recruited to play Division 1 and be around other really high level athletes because that wasn't really normal in my community. So once I got exposed to that, that's when I think my eyes opened up a lot more about like, all right, I want to play college, I want to play pro. What can I do with this? So then just getting to play AAU and travel around as a high schooler and get exposure and stuff, that was kind of when I knew. And then I was able to get recruited and go to college for it. And my path in college was a little bit unexpected. I ended up transferring after my first couple of years, but ultimately it got me on the path to where I am now.
Well, Nate, just the fact that you're wanting to drive or willing to drive to get to a location or a town where you had more opportunity says a lot because you're probably still fairly young at that point, right?
For sure. I think that my parents, I have to credit them for so much of it because I think they were always, my dad coached me a lot when I was growing up. He coached me in high school too, but they were always just supportive of what I wanted to do. They weren't putting pressure on me. They weren't saying I had to do this or had to do that. It was my passion was leading me. And so they were willing to go wherever I needed to go to make that happen. And I think they also realized that where I was at, it wasn't necessarily going to provide me with enough exposure or enough challenge to be able to um, get where I ultimately wanted to go.
Right, right. That's I feel like I'm watching kind of little dominoes get set up, you know what I mean? And this process because there's so many different potential turns along the way. Like you could have maybe not been interested or passionate about it. And, I'm sure you've seen where parents tend to want it more than the kids, right? And then how is that kid going to make that drive without doing it begrudgingly, if it's not really them that's wanting to do it, right? You see a lot of that in your experience?
For sure. I think that's one of the biggest things nowadays because a lot of parents are so fixated on my kid has to be the star. My kid has to go play D1 or whatever it is. And I think that really kills that intrinsic motivation for kids, which is the most important type of motivation we have because those external motivators, that's going to go away at some point, especially once you get to college. I think I see a lot of people be so motivated to get to college because that's what everybody's telling them to do. Then they go to college and then suddenly they're like, why am I doing this? This sucks. I have to like, it's a
Yeah.
job to me. And I think that what I was able to foster from a young age was this was a passion for me. And so even when I got to college, even when I went pro and it was a job and there was a lot of responsibility, the thing that was guiding me the most was that intrinsic drive and the love for it.
It's a great secret of excellence there, right? If you don't have that internal drive yourself. And I've seen that as a hypnotist in my own practice related to all different topics. Like let's say, and it's not as common now, but back, 20 years ago or something, somebody, a wife might have called because she wanted her husband to quit drinking, or a wife might have called because she wanted her husband to quit smoking. And not only does that happen with adults, but a parent could call because they wanted their kid to stop sucking their thumb, or a parent could call because they wanted, for their child to excel further in their sport. And really, it's all the same thing, right? If that person doesn't want to do it themselves, then they're not going to put in the effort. So it's your story is in alignment with that, and it makes it almost like obvious the level then that you could go. I mean, obviously everybody's different with their abilities and all that, but you have a few things lining up for you already early in life, right?
For sure. Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think that was coupled with the The lack of pressure my parents put on me. It was never a, I have to do this. It was I wanted to do it, and then they were just supportive of it and weren't ultra critical. They were just, even though my dad was a coach, he wasn't ultra critical. We would discuss the games in a really healthy way and just be excited for it rather than it feeling like this ultra high pressure thing that I think is prevalent for a lot of kids these days.
Another important step along the way, right? Because right in that, it's like such a selfless act of on his part to just support you and wherever you were at and as positive as possible. And um, so really neat. So here you are, you're in college, and what happens to the point that you start getting recognized and become a professional?
So after my first 2 years of college, I just really was not having a good experience. I was getting to play. I was actually a starter, but the role I had, the connection I had with the coach, it just I was not great for me. I was super anxious every time I played. It was not fun. It was just a bad environment for me. So I decided to transfer, and I think nowadays it's totally normal to transfer. Back when I transferred, it was frowned upon. It was like, "Oh, you're not mentally tough enough. You you got to push through, you got to stick it through," kind of thing. But I just realized that for me, everything I had worked for was just going to be thrown in the trash if I just stayed there and was miserable and went from loving my sport to hating it. So I ultimately decided to transfer, which was a great decision. And I enjoyed basketball the next years, and I was able to lead the team, be a captain, all of those things. And then I when I was finishing, I was kind of trying to figure out what was next for me, and I knew I wanted to continue playing, but I didn't really know what that looked like. And again, there was less visibility on how do you keep going. And then I was really fortunate that there was a athletic academic director. He was like head of the program, which he just recently passed away, which was super sad. But he was amazing, and he basically just had a conversation with me of like, what do you want to do? And I was kind of telling him, and he just happened to have a connection overseas that had a team, but was also connected to a university over there, so I could do my master's and play. And he got me connected, and he taught me a really valuable lesson that sometimes you just have to have a conversation and speak up about what you want, and you never know what doors are going to open. And that's really stuck with me since then, of just sometimes you do have to just put it out there. So I got connected with them. I had a few other offers to just play professional, but this one seemed really good because the coach was great, really welcoming to me. This was to go to the UK and play on the pro team. They would also pay for me to get my master's. And at the time, I did not know I wanted to go into sports psychology, but they showed me the different options that I could do, and I just had never heard of it. Like in America at the time, now it's prevalent to hear sports psychology. Back then, there was maybe 3 schools in America that offered sports psychology as a master's, and no one talked about it. Like we didn't have resources at college to talk to anybody, it just sounded really interesting to me because I always felt like, wow, if people could master the mental side, they'd be able to be so dominant as an athlete or something like that, because I could see it really black and white for me of when I was miserable the first couple of years and not myself, and how I played then versus when I was happy and the type of player I was there. And so that kind of was the jump start of my career. So I signed with them. I went and played professional with that team and did my master's over the next 2 years, which was kind of the start of everything.
That's so great. I love your story. And you've touched on like two more important things. It's funny because I'm like, yes, yes, yes. The fact that you trusted yourself, again, at a fairly young age, when you weren't jiving with the coach, when it just didn't feel like it was the best fit for you, and even social pressures to possibly stay, and in some cases, maybe not yours, parents might not have encouraged you to move on and transfer, but it's so important to trust yourself, right? And I imagine because of the way that you were brought up that you had that ability probably better than some people, um, because you weren't like being dictated to and told what to do. You had an opportunity early on to really listen to yourself and to receive support. And that's awesome. Cause yeah, you could have stayed and had a whole different experience and you just intuitively knew. So that's neat. And then clarity and an understanding of like, who am I, and not being afraid to talk about it. Or even if you were, like, you still overcame that and you talked about it. And I've seen over and over again in my own life, that, that saying, it's who you know, but it's also like serendipitous moments and meeting the right person at the right time. And we're blind to that when we're too busy being upset. We're too busy upset about our life or frustrated or replaying all the bad stories or whatever. These cool things are happening all around us, but we don't see them. But when we're in a place of like joy and happiness and feeling good and seeing the good in situations, then here's this opportunity and you're able to connect with it and then share with them. And then he goes, oh, by the way, I know something.
Mhm.
How great. Yeah, so you go out. Were you afraid? Because at what point how old were you at that point to go overseas and just move out there?
Let's see, how old was I when I graduated college? I must have been like 21, 22, probably 22, I think at that point. But yes, I was very scared. Every time I went overseas, I was nervous getting on that plane because it's not like it is in college where you get to go out and you visit and you meet people and you know what you're walking into. You're blind to all of it. You just walk in, and it was a little different this first time because I was going in with the university side of it as well. But every other year when I'm signing a pro contract, you don't know anything. You maybe talk to the coach, maybe, and you have a contract in hand, but then you're just walking in completely blind. You don't know where they're going to put you up to stay. You don't know anybody there. So yeah, it's pretty scary. And I think that was a challenge, but the best thing that I could have done, because I think it really pushed me outside my comfort zone and made me get comfortable with any type of situation. Like, I think if you talk to any athlete that's played internationally, you just hear the craziest stories. And I have some crazy stories about my time over there. But I think it just makes you so much more aware and grounded and just being able adaptable. I guess that's what it is. I think that when we get so stuck into a routine or what's comfortable for us, we're not sharpening the skill of adaptability. And the more you just force, like every year of my life for like a decade, I was moving every year. And so I had to be adaptable. And I think that was something that really, really has benefited me in my career and where I'm at now.
For sure. And then even as a peak performance coach, is when I think of the word adaptability related to an athlete, a competitive athlete. I mean, you've definitely got just like, here I am in a town at a tournament, and, athletes are always showing up with the unknown ahead of them, even if it's not overseas, right? This town that they're in. I travel a lot to tournaments, not as a competitor, but as a mental trainer, right? The bed, like I'm in an Airbnb right now, the bed can be horrible, right? So,
Yeah.
then you're not getting a good night's sleep. But it's not even just the bed. It could be the pillow. It could then be like, there's so many different things, the showing up and not knowing where you register, or, certain, like for me with clay shooters, they're squatted. They don't necessarily know who they're squatted with ahead of time. So then they meet their squad or their team. And then, you might get that personality of a know-it-all or
Yeah.
something like that. There's so many different things that can happen, right? It's so important to be adaptable as a successful competitive athlete in all these areas, even the miss, right? Because that's the next really big spot to be adaptable. Like, it is what it is and need to accept it and not get upset about it. So I bet a bunch of your own journey plays into how you're helping. So let's move up. So how many years were you a professional basketball player?
Just about 8, 7.5 or so. I did 2 years when I was doing my master's, and then I stayed 1 more year in the UK. I was doing a lot of sports psychology work while I was there, because I got a lot of connections through the school. And then from there, I went to Switzerland, Germany, Australia, and the UK is where I played.
Nice. Nice. I just went overseas for the first time. I've traveled all over the US and I've traveled like Caribbean and Mexico and all that, but never like over the ocean. And got married just a few months ago in Italy. And that was the first time for both of us there. And on the front end, we just were so clueless, and so many of my friends said, it's great over there. It's so easy to travel. It's safe. The only thing you have to really worry about is pickpocketing, and it's not, you can get on any tram, any train, it's really easy. And I just was like going into the unknown. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm gonna just buy a package. And now that we've gone over there, so cool to see a culture that like Italy is all Italian, right? Like it's this immersion in Italian, and to have born and raised in the US and not see how when you go to each country, there's like an immersion, that it's not just, little Italy in New York that's tiny. It's like everything, and there's so much about it that I just absolutely love. So for you, having that in your early 20s is how just another great experience for you, right?
Yeah, it was incredible. And I think it's transformed the way I see the world, just living in a lot of different cultures. And then on your team, you have people from all over the world too. And so I think that's been huge for my work as well, just because you start to understand how different people think from different, like a different cultural background and stuff like that, and how that's so influential with our mindset. So I think just having a little bit more of an understanding, because I've been to different places and seen it and felt it, I think that has really changed the way I see things.
That, yeah, when I helped VJ Singh win the FedEx Cup in '08, at one point he was ready to tell the whole world. And then the next day he was like, I'm not telling anybody. And if any of you guys tell anybody on my staff, you're all fired. And the way that people worked for him talked to me through that was like, he's from a different culture, Dawn, and to recognize just his mindset of that culture and how it probably affected what he would go public with and what he might say or not say or whatever, um, was really interesting because every culture is different and how they view women and how they view it, maybe an authoritative figure or somebody in the know, and whether they're willing to publicly go out there and say something like that. Have you noticed kind of like pros and cons related to different cultures and how they even affect you as a professional basketball player or even as a professional performance coach? Do you see that there's great things about it, but there's also some hindrances, I imagine, right?
I think definitely as a player, it was really hard. I think places like the UK and Australia were pretty easy to adapt to because English speaking, their culture isn't that different. But then once you started to get into Europe and then we're playing in different countries and stuff like that, I think, Germany, great culture, but it was also, we had a Eastern European coach who is really like no nonsense, really harsh and really intense. And definitely that Eastern European mindset, at least for this experience, was more harder, like no emotions, just like really hard nose type of approach
Mhm.
to it, which I think is challenging as as an American. Our stereotype over there is like that we're really, extroverted and bubbly and like, like loud and dancing and stuff like that, which kind of is me as a player. Like
Right.
I like to listen to music and dance and communicate and stuff. And definitely some of the cultures I would go into, they're more reserved, they're quiet. And it felt like it was much harder to connect to the teammates. I think sometimes you would walk into spaces where, there's people that gravitate towards each other because they speak the same language. When everyone's hanging out, they're not going to just speak English because I'm there. They're going to speak in whatever their language is. And so you kind of
Right.
feel a little bit on the outside, especially
Mhm.
with these pro teams. There's usually between 1 and 3 Americans on the team. So, getting integrated, you kind of have to work to show like, oh, I want to learn about your culture. I want to be a part of it. Cause I think that sometimes there's a little bit of a separation there. And then for work, I think too, just there are certain barriers to implementing techniques, I guess. So like, for example, for certain cultures, or even especially like men in certain cultures, speaking kindly or positively towards themselves, or even acknowledging kind of what you were saying, like acknowledging, oh, I'm good, I did well, like I'm a great athlete or something, that kind of goes against everything they were taught growing up. And
Hmm.
so for them, there's like this big barrier to trying to even acknowledge themselves in a positive way,
Yeah.
which is so deeply ingrained. So I think there's more on the work side, it's more challenges rather than, I guess, negatives. Whereas playing, it was definitely this immersive experience that was sometimes extremely challenging and kind of isolating sometimes.
Right, right. Those are great points. So much good insight there. Um, I've noticed, so again, going back to competitive clay shooting, because that's where a majority of my clients are right now. Every other year or something, we have the world championship in the US. And that's one of the larger events, right? So it tends to be one of the ones that I would go to. And I stopped going because year after year, I would see, the Italians are in their circles and speaking Italian, and the French were in their circles and speaking French. And they weren't really going around and necessarily talking to the vendors or interested in like something like the mental game and coming over and talking to me. And definitely, I'm not really the type that's going to go and approach them and try to like push what I do on anybody. So I didn't really try to immerse myself, but I could see as a player that would be beneficial. But it, it makes total sense, right? The way you explained it, as far as if they've got their group and they're all speaking French and that's easy and that's life and they're all the same culture, they got all this jive going on there. And that's their comfort zone. Speaking of like adaptability versus being uncomfortable, going to a whole different country, whole different location. Yeah, it definitely is something I've observed, at least on that scale of a world championship. Yeah.
For sure. That definitely makes sense. It's hard to penetrate those circles once they're established.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, what makes you decide to stop being a professional basketball player?
So once I really focused on being just a pro for a little bit, I pretty quickly realized that I love basketball, but I needed more. I needed to be mentally stimulated. I needed balance. I needed something. And so I was looking to see, well, do I want to see if I can do something remote, like a job on top of playing, or what could I do? And then when I was looking into what options there were for sports psychology in America, it still was pretty early on before sports psychology has exploded in America. And everything that was offered, I just did not align with. Like, I thought that what they offered in America was really behind what I was seeing in Europe and
Mm,
the UK. And it was normal in Europe and the UK for athletes to have somebody to work with and to talk to. And in America, it was only rarely they would. And a lot of times it was a clinical psychologist with like a sport focus, which
right.
is not at all the lane that I wanted. I wanted mine to be kind of this middle lane between performance and mental health. And because I thought both affected each other,
Mhm.
especially as an elite athlete, they're both influential. And I just didn't see anything fitting that. And so that's when I decided, well, let me just do it on my own. I already had some clients that I had worked with before. I was really fortunate when I was in the UK. I got to work with the Scotland national beach volleyball team, a men's team, and a pro soccer team on the women's side, or football for them. And so I had already gotten experience and had some people I was still talking to. So I was kind of just decided, well, let me see if I can just start my own business. So I started working on that. And then that was when COVID started to hit, when I was
Mm,
kind of in the middle of getting that all finalized. And I was in Germany at the time. And that was one of the first places COVID started coming out of. And so we were nearing the end of the season. The season got canceled right away. There was all this uncertainty. My boyfriend at the time was playing in the UK. So I flew to the UK. 2 days later, they're like, everything's shutting. You got to get home. We flew home. And then everybody was in lockdown or
yeah.
COVID or whatever that was. And so that gave me time to really, really put everything together for my business. And then it was actually, I mean, COVID was obviously not great, not good in any way. But for me, it was an opportunity to work on that. And people started to focus a lot more on mental health and doing things remote. And that was perfect for what I did. And so that's when I launched everything. I continued to play, but I was basically like, well, I can do this overseas. I can do it part time. So I was still playing for another 3 years or
Oh,
so while
okay.
I
Yeah.
was doing this. So it was part time for me. I was still playing. And then I felt my business was getting bigger and bigger. And I was like, okay, this is really hard to balance both of it. And so I kept having to, kind of pull back from the work side of things to make sure I was still focusing on basketball enough. And then I have this injury that I still haven't gotten fixed, but basically I have a torn labrum in my hip, which is I played on for a couple of years, and it got progressively worse because it was affecting just how I ran and jumped and stuff. So my knees were hurting, my Achilles were hurting, and just all the overcompensation. And I was getting a lot older. So also my body was hurting. So it was kind of a combination between I needed to either get surgery to keep going, but then that was going to be a whole year recovery, um, which was an option. But I also had to focus on my business. So then my last season I played in Australia, and that the balance was pretty good there, but the time zones weren't great. And so I was having to wake up really early for sessions and then stay up late for sessions. I wasn't getting a lot of sleep. And between that and my body hurting, I was like, okay, let me just commit to my business. And my boyfriend at the time, he was also retiring from playing. So it was kind of good timing for both of us. And then basically I was nervous about, can I make my business full time? Like, am I going to be able to make it big enough? And so I really just committed to growing it as much as I possibly could. And then over the next years, I was able to grow it. But it was kind of a slow breakup with basketball because I
Oh,
was I was having to kind of be 1 foot in, 1 foot out with my business, which I think was good because I think if I had to like cut it off cold turkey, that would have been really hard for me. Because I definitely never got to the point where I was over basketball. I still loved it and still love it to this day. And it was hard to stop. But I also
yeah.
knew that I was very passionate about pursuing sports psychology and building my business.
Nice, nice. I gotcha. Good. Um, so here you are, you're back in the States and you're gonna dive in and build your business. But you had already said you had observed a difference between the acceptance of like a mental trainer overseas versus the States. So what did you do? Like knowing that, how did you decide to, I don't know, raise awareness, I guess, and try to really get your name out there to the point where folks that maybe had never heard of it or weren't interested in the mental game at the time, that you ended up doing well.
Hmm. Yeah, I thought that was going to be my biggest barrier to success. And I think that I was completely proven wrong, actually, that that wasn't my biggest barrier because with COVID, athletes started talking a lot more about their mental health. And then you
Nice.
started to have like Simone Biles came out and talked about things. Like you had just these really big moments where pro athletes that were super visible started talking about it a little bit more. You
Mhm.
saw more tennis players having their mental coaches on the sidelines. And so that kind of took care of itself. I was more trying to figure out like how could I get my name out there a little bit more? And one was I kind of going back to like connecting with people and having conversations. A huge amount of my business came from connections I made over the 8 years and even before that in
Mm.
college and high school. That a lot of it was pretty organic because the agent that worked with me as a player, now I partner with that agency to work with other pro basketball players and just different trainers and coaches and physios throughout the years was a huge part of it. And then
Nice.
actually the biggest thing that helped me is I was in this moment where I was like, okay, I need to do some type of marketing. What's that going to look like? And I could either go the traditional route or I could go social media. And I decided I was going to commit to TikTok. That was going to be my thing.
Nice.
And so that's actually what I did. I've never spent any money on marketing. I get on TikTok and I I do little videos, and sometimes they're popular and sometimes I get like 200 views and 10 likes and it's fine, but that's actually gotten me out there so much and I get
Mhm.
people. So I have a balance between random people that see me through social media, and then I've got all of the organic connections. And I think since then it's been able to grow from there just through the work that I've done with people. But yeah, I think a lot of the connections I made, and this is what I tell so many people that are growing up trying to build their career, you never know what connection might help you long term. And networking doesn't
Yeah.
mean you're going up to people giving them your business card. It means making genuine connections with people. And you never know, it might be 5 years down the line, that person might be integral to your success. And that's how it has been for me. I've had incredible opportunities doing this simply through just having genuine connections with people over the
Yeah.
years. So I think that's been huge.
Another secrets of excellence, right? And it's really, it's like being you, being honest, honoring who you are, having genuine connections and conversations and relationships. And what is it? 5 degrees of separation or something like that they say. But when so I was doing like motivational keynote speaking, and I had this one company that would hire me a lot, and they were in the mortgage. It was a mortgage industry. And they had flown me up to their annual conference up in Chicago this one particular year. And I remember so I'm there to speak to the execs, right? Nothing to do with sports. I was already working with athletes, but it was nothing to do with sports. And I just remember walking around. So they're having their annual conference. They're flying people in. So they're flying in a mental trainer. They're flying in a massage therapist. The ladies are getting manis and petties at their desks. And I was like, what is this company? So anyways, the massage therapist that they flew in, his name was Jim, and he went by Jim's Healing Hands. And it just so happened that he was a massage therapist and like a Reiki healer and all that for PJ Tour pros. It's just so happened. That's what he did. So what happened was, so I did my speaking, and the execs that heard me were getting their massages, throughout the weekend. And apparently they were telling him about me. And so he just, at different massages kept hearing about this person named Dawn and what they loved about what I said or whatever. So then by the end of the weekend, he comes to me and he's like, I have about a dozen PJ Tour pros that could use you. And that's how I started. But not only just how it started, but, because something like that could happen and then there's no follow through also. Like there's different things that can kind of happen. Like some people say something like that, but then aren't really serious or maybe just don't have the time or the energy in their life to kind of move forward with it and whatever it is. But yeah, and it just unfolded. So the next time the PJ Tour was in Florida, he's like, come on down, girl. I got them all ready to talk to you. And that opened the door for me.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think that's very similar to certain things that have happened for me and opportunities I've gotten. And I think if you have a good product or like you are a genuine person, the things you give to people are genuinely helpful, a lot of these things work themselves out and opportunities open. And I think, like you've said a few times, if you're just being authentic and genuine and putting yourself out there, more opportunities will come than you think, but you just have to be ready to walk through them.
Carrying that same concept over, in my opinion, that's what happens in the zone. So literally exactly what so instead of on the scale of like business opportunities and, meeting the right people, being present, enjoying your life, enjoying experiences, being authentic, being true to yourself, which is the opposite of, right, like worrying and doubting and overthinking and frustration and being caught up in, if somebody's just walking around like a zombie pissed off, they're missing those serendipitous, really cool things like that encounter at the coffee shop or whatever. Or they might downplay it, or that person might start talking to them and they're just so upset in their brain they don't even want to talk to somebody. But anyways, so like that's the two extremes that can be happening, but that's the same over here with sports, right? So how do you see that carrying over here, and like what's your belief in the zone state? What's your experience with that, both as a professional basketball player and now as a performance coach?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything that you just said. I think that the other piece of it that seems really huge as a player, but then also a coach, is if you're driven by fear, it's really hard to ever access that zone. It's impossible in my opinion. And I know what it feels like being consequentially driven, like being scared of what might happen or what might go
Yeah.
wrong versus what am I going after? What do I want? And being very clearly driven for something.
Nice. Okay.
And I always talk to different athletes about, there's two different types of mistakes. There's, aggressive mistakes and there's passive mistakes, or good mistakes
Mm.
and bad mistakes. And I think that you're going to make mistakes either way. And an acceptance of that is really important. And if you're only focusing on being perfect and you're just trying to be really passive and careful and get everything right, mistakes are going to come anyways. And you're going to be stuck on them and you're going to hold yourself back. And there's nothing to learn from those moments.
Mm-hmm.
But I think being in the zone is being okay with mistakes, going after it, being aggressive, and knowing, okay, mistakes are going to happen, but knowing sports are games of mistakes. Everybody, I mean, some sports less than others, but for the most part, you're going to make mistakes. And so it's being able to go after things. And if you're going to make mistakes, make sure they're aggressive and you're going for it, because you're going to be able to
Mm.
adapt and learn and move forward. So I think just being in a state that is not fear driven and more challenge driven and going after it is a huge aspect for me.
Nice. Nice. What do you think of the phrase, it's 90% mental? Again, especially since you've been a professional basketball player. And I'll just say, in my experience working with not just elite athletes, but elite athletes who are also coaches or trainers or that have students, um, some of them that don't totally understand the mental game, they might understand it from a place of they've lived it, but they don't necessarily know how to teach it, right? And then, but I've observed that some of them don't like the statement it's 90% mental, because they take it almost like a hit to their mechanics. Like, meaning if mental's 90%, then your mechanics training, coaching is only 10 or something like, and that's not the way I see it. So what are your thoughts related to both mental and mechanics and the statement of it's 90% mental?
Yeah. Well, I guess two different sides of thought on this. On one end, I think that literally everything you do stems from your brain. And so therefore, even
I
the
know.
physical side comes
It's
from your
mental.
mind.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
agree.
So I think
It's a
from
hundred
that
percent. Yeah.
exactly. So I think from that standpoint, it is, yes, 90%, 100%, everything is mental. It is all our brain.
Yeah.
But I think just from a different perspective, like a less maybe scientific perspective,
Less
that
philosophical. Yeah.
exactly. I think the only other thing is I sometimes people are really fixated on, oh, I have to feel confident, or like I have to feel perfect to be able to perform well. And I think that sometimes where this is also mental, but I think that like part of it is people think that they just need to change their minds and that's what's going to change everything. But a lot of it starts with action, which is,
Mm.
this is kind of philosophical too. So it still stems from the mind. But I think that like a lot of times, you got to get out and do it. You got to go get those reps. You got to go, take those chances in the game or in live competition. And you don't have to feel perfect. You don't have to have the perfect mindset when you're a developing athlete at 15 years old. Like you need to go out and do it to build that. And so
Mm.
I think that to me, yes, so much of it comes down to your mentality and approach, but I also see from maybe people that are a little bit less in tune with the mental side of it, that sometimes you've got to act first and then the mentality will start to build. Got
Mm.
to have the right mindset to act, but like, it's all kind of a cyclical, or like it's all connected. But I do think that everything stems from the mind, but sometimes you got to just get out and rep it out and see where you go from there.
Yeah. It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right?
Right.
I like to explain to my clients that confidence is like a big bowling ball, and it will swipe out all the little pins that, a pin of fear and worry and doubt and insecurity and all those things that can hinder you and make us our own worst enemy. And so confidence is like this bowling ball, but then people are like, well, I can't have confidence unless I'm winning. I'm like, no, you can, because it's all in perception. You can see a good in everything. Like you said, you learn the most from what you would call a mistake, like what you would say is went wrong or went bad, because it's like a neon sign, like right
Hmm.
here. You work on this, you're gonna you're gonna excel further. Um, So, deliberately building confidence through experience, but also through the right mindset, I think is so important.
I
What,
agree with that.
yeah. What are your thoughts and feelings on intuitive or instinctive performance? For me, again, working with clay shooters, shooting instinctively, or with golfers, swinging intuitively or instinctively, not trying to make it happen or try to recreate something, or not trying to be too careful, like not overthinking. So that the more instinctive or intuitive, your thoughts on that. And again, one more thing is I've had different debates. There are some people that are like, um, absolutely, that's where it is, right? And then they just don't know how to do it. There's others that are like, no, you've got to be more analytical and conscious about it, and measure and make things happen. So, what's your feeling on that?
1 second, can I plug this
Mhm.
in before I answer?
Yeah, of
Sorry to
course.
interrupt
Yep.
that.
Yeah. No, you're good.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's huge, the instinctual performance, and I think that that's how you get into a flow state, is by being instinctual. I think that basically, when you're talking about your instincts, that's driven by deliberate practice, strengthening the neural connections in your brain, the muscle memory that's been built over time. And that allows you to let your body do what it knows how to do in that moment. But those instincts have to be built over time. And I think that's where some of that, within deliberate practice, there can be some of those more analytical moments where you are guiding yourself a little bit more, having clear focuses, talking to yourself a little bit more. But when it comes to performance, to me, and I think what a lot of the science backs up, is that if you're in your conscious mind, talking, analyzing the entire time, it's a much slower process than your neurons firing and your instincts driving everything. And there's a time and place, like in different sports, where there's a pause in action, where you can talk to yourself and you analyze something and you refocus yourself. But I do think that once you're in it, if you're trying to micromanage everything with your mind and not letting yourself be instinctual, you're ultimately going to slow your whole process down. And because our conscious brain doesn't know how to react in these moments as well as our muscle memory does. So to me, if you're trying to be too analytical or trying to micromanage things too much, you're actually holding yourself back from letting your body do what it knows how to do. Because I think once you're really in that zone and you're being super instinctual, you start to do things that you even impress yourself. You're like, oh,
Right.
dang, I can do that. That's pretty nice.
That's that whole, it didn't even feel like me. Like, whoa, that was neat. Because they'll say it didn't even feel like it was me pulling the trigger, and time flew by and it felt euphoric and it was amazing. And I wish it could just continue. And I wasn't consciously thinking at all. I find it super fascinating, because to me, that is the human peak performance state. It's not just for athletes, it's for everybody. And we're the only thing that keeps us out of it when we're in any level of fear. But it's available to everybody all the time. That was another thing that I've had, some, again, like high level athletes who are also coaches. And I say that because I think they can almost, because they don't necessarily understand the whole mental game, that they can take offense or even be threatened by someone who has more experience with it. This is just something I've observed. So some of them have gone public to say, like, you can't make the zone happen. You can't create that experience. And I think on a surface, superficial level, it's true, because that's forcing. Like, you can't make the zone happen. You can't make a shot happen. You can't come in beta, super conscious and super analytical, because it's quite the opposite of what the zone is. And so I was a hypnotherapist before I started working with athletes. And so just the fact of helping people to go into a relaxed alpha theta state, meditative, hypnotic state, was something that I was a professional at, right? And then would give suggestions for change into all different topics. And so then you fast forward to start working with athletes. And I observed that they were describing the zone state, the flow state, the same way that my hypnosis clients were describing the hypnotic meditative state. Like, they would come, my hypnosis clients would come out of hypnosis, they would be like, wow, that felt amazing. That was euphoric. I wish it could just continue. I didn't even feel like, it was totally me, like the information that was coming through and everything seemed to disappear around me. Like we're talking 5, 10 years of hearing those kind of statements before I started working with athletes. And then they were using the same exact statements. And I was like, what is going on here? And then science came out. It's probably been 5 or 8 years ago now that the zone state is the alpha state. And I was like, I've been seeing it. I had been seeing it already because that's what light hypnosis or meditation is. And yeah, so to simplify it, then beta is all this analytical conversation happening, and that's where we overthink or overtry or whatever. Alpha is right below that. So whether someone's relaxing in a meditation, relaxing in hypnosis, relaxing to go to sleep, or just chilling out while they're performing, that's the spot. That's the sweet spot. And I'm just fascinated by. I love it. I am fascinated by the zone. I love teaching people how to get in the zone, and not only that, but living in it myself.
Yeah, that's huge. And don't you love when you've been working on something and then you see science or something to back up your experience and you're like, ah, exactly.
Yes, I love it. So many things about it. What are your thoughts related to the importance of having fun when you're competing? Again, kind of the opposite of like worrying or doubting or whatever. But I've had some top athletes say, I'm not here to have fun. I'm here to win, which is different than how I see it. But how do you see the fun element when competing?
I think it's huge. I think it's one of the most important things. And I know that there is this cultural element where it's like competing is not fun, or competing is fun, but like you're not supposed to have fun. It's about
Yeah.
being focused and serious. And I talk to a lot of athletes about how there is this strong cultural pull in America where, everybody grew up with the documentaries on like the Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the very intense, like super serious, almost like on the verge of angry, like that type of performance zone, which is not necessarily the norm. Like I think those are actually the anomalies, the outliers, which, everyone likes to sensationalize those stories, the people that are just the grind never stops. It's so intense and stuff like that. Most people, though, can't operate that way. They don't work their best that way. And I love now that you start to see some really high level athletes starting to show a slightly different side. Like I think I always, just because basketball is my background, I like to compare somebody like Steph Curry to a Kobe Bryant. You could be the Steph Curry who's joking around and smiling and like kind of talking trash and like kind of, doing his handshakes and dancing and stuff versus, you might be more like the Kobe who's ultra serious. But I think understanding that being focused looks different for different people, and that is connected to our optimal performance zone, like what state we perform our best at. And I think understanding that there's not one size fits all. It's, you have to figure out where do you perform your best. And I would say for a lot of people, that's in a state where they're actually enjoying what they do. Not a lot of people, unless you enjoy that serious state, not a lot of people are actually performing their best super tight and tense and like not super happy.
I love that. That's a great observation. You're reminding me of a hypnosis client I had years ago. And she, this thinking of performance, not as an athlete, but she was in a high level MLM. And so she had to regularly speak on stage. And she wasn't the only one, right? There were others at their high level that would speak. And she would, totally freeze. I felt so bad for her. Like she would like maybe one or two words would come out, and it was hard to watch, right? And so before hiring me, she had tried to do what one of the other guys did. And one of the guys that spoke regularly, he would be like boxing behind stage and jumping on a trampoline and high five, punching people, and he would amp himself up like that. And so she tried it, and she was like, it only made it worse. And to me, it's exactly what you just said. Like for her performance, for her to have her best performance, like she actually had to do the opposite. Like she had to go by herself, sit down, meditate, calm herself down, get herself in a good spot. And I remember teaching her, like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, he's not just doing it. like that's not the right way for everybody. It's just the right way for
Hmm.
him, right? Another thought coming in my mind, there was a guy from the UK that was playing, soccer, football over there, and came over and was working on becoming a pro golfer. And he brought over that same, like, like the way that a football soccer player is just like ready to kick butt and plow somebody over, and
Yep.
he was having the hardest time becoming a golfer, right? Like this slow pace and all that time between shots where your mind can start going crazy and everything. That was another fascinating observation I had, working with somebody so different.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Um,
Especially, oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, especially it's interesting that you saw a difference between sports too, between football, soccer, and golf, and still the same person, but like their needs for in a different sport or a different environment. And I think that's so important for people to recognize too, even if it's within the same sport, like maybe your regular game versus a championship. What does your preparation look like between the two? Because the environment and the external stimulus is a little bit different. And like maybe you have to calm yourself down or in certain situations, and other times you have to hype yourself up, and understanding which direction you need to go for yourself is important.
Right. It's very, very true, which goes all the way back full circle to you at a young age, like trusting yourself and listening to yourself. One of the secrets of excellence is understanding, knowing yourself, honoring yourself, being able to have those conversations around it, trust how you feel and everything. And it's so important. And whatever avenue a person's going down, to be able to, you got to learn and do what works for you in spite of what somebody else is doing and what works for them, without like it affecting your confidence, right? Or your belief in
Hmm.
yourself, or trusting yourself. Yeah. So
Definitely.
what's one piece of advice, or like a little magic pill, if you could say one thing to people that would help them, or athletes, whichever you want, um, your words of wisdom?
I guess there's a lot of different directions I could go with this, but I think that the one thing that keeps coming up for me a lot with a lot of different clients is knowing that there will be tough times, whether it's your career or your sport or whatever. Most likely your path is not going to go the way you think it's going to go. Whatever you have designed in your mind of how it should go, it's 99% of the time it's not going to go the way you think it's going to go, and there's going to be setbacks. And I think the people that end up seeing the most success and having the most fulfilling careers and really doing what they want to do are the people that persevere through those really challenging times. And I think back to my career, there were multiple moments where, like back in college or certain times with getting pro contracts or something, where it wasn't what I wanted or it wasn't what I thought I wanted or needed, but I just kept going, and it ultimately led me to all of these awesome opportunities and a path that I was ultimately so grateful for. And I think every single high level pro athlete that I've worked with had a moment or multiple moments like that where it could have gone either way, but they decided to dig in and keep going. And so I would just say, no matter what, even if you feel like you're in a moment where you can't see the path forward, just keep going and taking it one step at a time, because if you keep persevering, you really are going to find great opportunities ahead. And usually those hard moments is where the breakthrough is about to happen. So consistency, as long as you're consistent, a breakthrough is going to come.
Nice. Keep your eye on the prize.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Don't get too low as with the
Yeah.
challenges, right? Yeah, nice. Well, I do want to tell listeners that they can get free goodies and opt-ins for any of my 3 businesses at dawngrant.com/free. Um, I'd love for you to share your contact info, Allison. So, website, email, whatever you'd like, your handles.
Yeah, for sure. So everything is Coach Gorrell. So my last name is Gorrell. So my website is coachgorrell.com. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok at Coach Gorrell. And then anyone's welcome to send me an email at coachgorrell@gmail.com. So everything is Coach Gorrell. So definitely feel
Nice.
free to reach out.
Super easy then. Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, and definitely follow me on social media, and you'll get lots of free tips and tidbits and great podcasts just like this one. So thank you very much, Allison. Very insightful. I love the journey you're on, and I hope that we stay in touch and I can keep seeing all the great impact you're making and having with athletes and all that.
Thank you.
Cool.
And likewise, thank you so much for having me.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mind Mastered Secrets of Excellence with Don Grant. Whether you're an elite athlete or pursuing success in your career or personal life, Don Grant's expertise and insights are here to guide you. Don't forget to visit dongrant.com/free to grab your exclusive free resources, hypnosis audios, mental training tools, and even a golf cart at her club. If you enjoyed today's episode, follow, rate, and share this podcast. Stay connected with Dawn on all social media platforms for more inspiration, tips, and updates. Remember, mastering your mind is the key to unlocking your full potential. Until next time, keep pushing your limits and striving for excellence.